partidul s-a născut.
Ce știm noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și sfut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce înseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut.
Să
До самых окраин, южный гор до северных морей. Человек проходит, как хозяин необъятной родины своей. Тут жизнь невольна и широка, точно Волга полная течет. Молодым везде у нас дорога, старикам везде у нас почет. Никто у нас не лишний, по заслугам каждый награжден. Золотыми буквами мы пишем всенародный сталинский закон. Этих слов величие и славу никакие годы не затрут. Человек всегда имеет право на учение, подвиг и на труд. Весенний ветер веет, с каждым днем все радостнее жить. И никто на свете не умеет лучше нас смеяться и любить. Но сурово брови мы насупим, если враг захочет нас сломать. Как небесную родину мы любим, бережем, как ласковую мать.
нас не согреет треск мечей под барабанный раскат. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. И так как все мы люди, то должны мы, извините, что-то есть. Хотят накормить нас пустой болтовней, чертям спасибо за честь. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. И так как ты рабочий, то не жди, что нам поможет другой. Себе мы свободу добудем твою своей рабочей рукой. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. Modern Platz in das ist. Rede ein in der Arbeitereinheitsfront, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам.
Утреннего стяг в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, веют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы. Будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути. И он продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди.
Hello, everybody, and welcome along. It is the evening of the 15th of June, 2025, and happy Father's Day to all those out there celebrating. That is in the West, of course, and we're here again tonight to focus on the ongoing U.S. war on Iran. And I say a US war on Iran because, as we have established in the previous two episodes, this is a war on Iran waged by the US led imperialist bloc, which, of course, mirrors the US war on Russia. Which is organized by the US led imperialist bloc but executed via the medium of Ukraine, via the hands and the bodies of the Ukrainians. This one is being fought by the Israelis on behalf of US imperialism and British imperialism, being the two primary movers here. So don't believe me, believe an idiot politician from Britain who inadvertently blurts out the truth. Now I'm going to play for you here, and I apologize in advance for the incredible level of stupidity you're about to be exposed to. But this is Britain's finance minister, given the rather pretentious title of Chancellor of the Exchequer, being interviewed just this morning on Sky News by Labour Party hack Trevor Phillips. So let's see what a certain Rachel Reeves has to say about British involvement in this war. So let's just share that. Here we go. Get ready, everybody. Get ready for the stupid.
Can you just tell us about the safety of British citizens in the war zone, whether that's in Israel or Iran or in the region generally?
The Prime Minister announced last night that we are sending assets, including jets, to the Middle East to ensure that our assets and our people in the region are protected, and also to support our allies. Obviously, it's incredibly concerning about what's happening in the Middle East for people who are there, but also because of the global ramifications potentially. And that's why the Prime Minister and our allies are urging for de-escalation. That is what is really critical right now, calm heads and a de-escalation of the conflict. And the Prime Minister is now at the G7 summit in Canada with our key allies around the world, and this will be front and centre of those discussions.
When you say we've put assets into the area, does that mean that we're at war?
No, it does not mean that we are at war, and we have not been involved in these strikes or this conflict. But we do have important assets in the region, and it is right that we send jets to protect them, and that's what we've done. It's a precautionary move, and at the same time, we are urging de-escalation. The Prime Minister has spoken to the Prime Minister of Israel. Our Foreign Secretary David Lammy has spoken to his Iranian counterparts, and we've been very busy these last 48 hours or so urging restraint, and that's what the Prime Minister will be doing in Canada this week.
We are allies of the Israelis. If they were to ask us to deploy our assets in support of their operations, would we?
Well, as I said, we haven't been involved, and I'm not going to get involved in sort of operational decisions for the future. This is a fast-moving situation. Israel has every right to defend itself. And we also are very concerned about Iran's nuclear deterrent.
What's the point of being an ally if you don't come to your allies' aid when they ask?
Well, the US have also been clear they haven't been involved in these.
Right, so did you just stop showing that particular piece of horror there? Did you understand all of that? I notice, by the way, they always speak in the same weird, strangulated way. You notice that she sounds a little bit like Keir Starmer. She's speaking through her teeth and she looks absolutely fucking terrified. But if you could decode the bullshit there, what she's essentially saying is she's, first of all, she, like Trump and the Americans, that she is denying that the British are directly involved. We know that they have been, not just in this, but in many other things. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. But also, she's openly admitting that they are deploying British military assets to West Asia to defend interests and to defend their assets in the area. So what are those interests? What are those assets? Who are those allies? So British interests and assets in the area include, of course, a naval base in Qatar, which the last government re-established after years of being absent from what was used to be referred to as east of Suez. But also, they're talking about British assets in terms of British military bases, but also British oil installations, British oil companies that have interests in places like Saudi and the other Gulf states. So that's what they're talking about, defending those against what? Against potential Iranian counterstrikes. Now, as to the claim that the Britain is not involved and has not been involved in the war in Iran, that is transparent bullshit. Or that Britain wasn't involved in the war on Gaza, also transparent bullshit. This is the normal lie that the Brits come out with, and we know it's untrue because there's been it was reported by a number of sources a while ago, over a week ago, that that there was NATO reconnaissance aircraft flying around the borders of Iran. We know that in terms of the British, they have been having the Israelis use the bases that they have in British occupied Cyprus. That we know that the British, thanks to the work of declassified UK, that the British Air Force has been flying reconnaissance flights over Gaza on behalf of and to aid the Israeli assault. We know that the Germans have had their aircraft in the skies above Jordan because one of them accidentally, apparently, turned on its transponder and gave away its position. And we know also that the Americans themselves have been refueling the Israeli jets over places like Syria. So this claim that the British are not involved in this is transparent nonsense. A British ship was intercepted by the Iranian Navy, skulking about, trying to get close to the coast of Iran to carry out intelligence operations. So the British are deeply involved in this. They're up to their necks in this. So the work of Declassified UK has been very good on covering the British government's involvement in the Israeli murder spree in Gaza. So this is at this stage, it is the Israelis that are doing the bombing campaigns and and it's their assets, it would appear, who are doing the assault, the terrorist actions inside Iran itself. But without the Western bloc backing them up, the Israelis wouldn't be able to do anything. Without the US refueling their aircraft over Syria, they wouldn't be able to get close to Iran. And if you look at the statements coming from the US itself, of course, Britain, France, Germany, not sure of the Italian statements as yet, but the key European players are all saying the same thing. We urge restraint. Israel has a right to defend itself. Well, if we take the bullshit story as standard here, let's say we believe that it's an Israeli assault for a moment. How is Israel defending itself by blowing up targets in Iran when it's Israel struck first? And Israel struck first, by the way, all the way back in April of last year when they bombed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, but before the fall of the Assad-led government there. So how is Israel what are they doing? Preemptively defending themselves, given that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon and it could have one apparently quite quickly now, but Reeves's story here just doesn't make any sense. The British have been involved all the way through the war on the Palestinians. The British, of course, if we go back into history, were the key players in setting up the Israeli state in the first place. So this is all nonsense. She's admitted there that the British forces are already deployed to the region. She's saying, oh, it's to protect our interests there. But in reality, it's to protect Israel, and Israel is one of the key interests at stake here. And so they are involved. Trevor Phillips's question about, well, why aren't you deploying now? Well, they are deployed now. They're just not prepared to admit it. They will not admit the extent of which they are involved in propping up the Israeli assault on Iran. And they will certainly not admit that this is an attack which has been designed and built in Washington, London, and executed by Tel Aviv, but also involves Paris and Berlin, as well as the ludicrously over-the-top statements from the German foreign ministry have made clear. So this is Israel acting at the head of an entire bloc of nations, acting in the same way that the Ukrainian regime acts as the tip of the spear against the Russians, so the Israeli regime acts as the tip of the spear against Iran. And that is for all the reasons I've gone into for the past couple of nights. So let's get to the title of this video, which is Why Communists Must Back Iran. Now, this title, I've chosen it deliberately to be as provocative as possible to any Western leftists watching, because the subject of Iran will really sort the actual communists from the fake communists. Because whenever you look at any material produced by various sort of idiotic Trotskyites and social democrats and various others on the subject of Iran, they'll immediately descend into a denunciation of the Mullah regime or the regime of the Ayatollahs, and ranting and raving about the cruelty and the tyranny of Iran and all of that stuff. And whilst they will say that they oppose Israel and they oppose US imperialism, they'll spend most of their time ranting and raving about how the Iranian regime must fall. In the same way, I mean, if you clipped stuff out of a Trotskyite article on Iran and mixed it up with a Benjamin Netanyahu speech about Iran, it'd look about the same. That's the truth. And so therefore we have to consider, like, well, what attitude should communists take here? Now, if you'll just bear with me here for a moment, I just have to duck out and check something. Be right back with you. Right, pardon me there for a moment. I just had to duck out due to check on a barking dog, but there you go. As always with the Trotskyites, you have to view their work in its totality. So whereas in every conflict, going all the way back to the days of the Cold War, but let's just focus on the post-Cold War era, particularly. Let's look at stuff like the Kosovo War. What you will get is the Trotskyites will say that the US action is wrong, but here's a long denunciation of Milosevic and everything to do with him, and etc., etc. Here's and get to the Iraq War, and the same thing. They'll say they oppose it, but then they'll repeat every single piece of propaganda about the Iraqi government, and they'll say that it should be overthrown, just not by the US. But they will repeat oceans of propaganda in doing so. And the same is true now for this war in Iran. Now, I will in future episodes pull up some of the Trotskyite articles about Iran, just so we can see what we're talking about here. But the reason why I think and communists must back Iran in this struggle is for two reasons. First of all, again, we must go back to first principles here and look at the principal contradiction facing communists in the imperialist countries, and that is the ability of the ruling classes of the Western imperialist bloc, Britain, France, Germany, the US, etc., to actually still in the neo-colonial period extract super profits from the colonized peoples of the world, and that is the first part here, and this is the to bear in mind, and their ability to do that actually is related to, of course, their continued ability to dominate the global market, and of course the ability to continually subjugate nations. And they're able to use a significant part, small but significant part, of the profits they generate via their continued domination over the oppressed nations to make certain concessions, domestically speaking, to calm working class discontent by making certain concessions. They were able to do that for a little while. Not anymore. Not anymore. Not to the extent that they could do in the immediate post-war period. The imperialism's too rotten and parasitic. The capitalist systems in the different imperialist countries are too crisis-riddled to make too many concessions now. But they can still, of course, move a lot of capital around, and therefore, of course, that makes them still dangerous. But if you remove the ability of the US, the British, the French, the Germans to exploit different nations in the world via the neo-colonial system that was set up after the 50s, then you remove their ability to continue to accumulate capital in the City of London, Wall Street, etc., and you remove their ability to essentially buy off sections of the working class that they've been doing successfully for many years, domestically speaking. So, as Stalin pointed out all the way back in the foundations of Leninism, our natural allies are those who are fighting our ruling class, because our ruling class are dragging our countries down into an abyss as their system degenerates. And the only thing they want to do is to be able to, as Lenin said, clip their coupons for a few more years. So why does this relate to Iran? As I've outlined over the past couple of days, this attack on Iran is about one thing and one thing only, and that is regime change in Iran. That is the overriding concern of the US imperialists, the British imperialists, the French and the Germans as well, but the US and Britain in particular. They wish to return Iran to the status that it had under the Shah. Now, I don't think that they will be able to do this, but that is the aim. Forget anything else they say. All the other stuff they come out with is just rhetoric and propaganda. The aim of this is to secure the collapse of the Islamic Republic and the return of Iran into the status of a neo-colony. And the reason for that is because, of course, well, there's several. First of all, they wish to get their hands on the resources of Iran, particularly the oil and the gas. Also, they want to asset strip Iran and deindustrialize it and turn it back into a site of just simple raw resource extraction. One of the things the revolution has been able to do over the last 46 plus years since 1979 has been to actually carry out an extensive industrialization program in Iran to make it more than just a site of oil extraction, and that is one of the thing that the imperialists absolutely cannot stomach over and above absolutely everything else. They must have Iran not only returned to neo-colonial domination, whether it's the return of the Shah or something else that enables them to do it, but they must then deindustrialize, asset strip, and destroy the Iranian industrial base and return it to a place that just does subsistence agriculture and oil extraction. That's it. That's what they want to do. It's nothing to do with the nuclear program either. Not really. I mean, they are concerned that if Iran gets a nuclear bomb, it's a lot more difficult to overturn them. But really, this is about reversing the Iranian Revolution of 1979 and being able to asset strip Iran and hyper exploit its population. This is what it's about. Israel is the chosen tip of this particular spear in doing this, and this is the way that they have chosen to go about it. As I've said in previous episodes, they are limited in what they can do against Iran, but they are going to throw everything they conceivably can at it in terms of terrorism, regime change operations, intelligence operations, the whatever it is that they can get Israel to do, short of a nuclear blast, they will do. This is the agenda. And so, therefore, it is for us in the West, who are aware of the games being played by our ruling class, we have to point out to the domestic working class here that this is the agenda. They wish to destroy Iran in order to exploit its resources and to return it to subjugation. We, the working class of the imperialist nations, have slowly seen all of the concessions that were once made to us withdrawn over time. We are now face to face with nothing but relentless decay. It is in our interests that Iran should win this confrontation with US imperialism, just as it is in our interests that the Russians should win their confrontation with US imperialism in Ukraine. Now, it is in our interests as those who aspire to be the vanguard of the working class to explain to the working class domestically that our enemy, the enemy in London that is making the life of our class objectively much worse, is seeking to get out of the crisis of their own system by destroying other nations. And this is something that we must be clear with people about. And it's something that we must also be clear with people about in terms of why we back a sovereign and independent Iran. We back a sovereign and independent Iran because, again, that is in our interest to do so as workers who wish to overthrow the ruling class here. We want to have a relationship of equals with all countries, a mutually beneficial trading relationship under a socialist system in this country, which is what we want to achieve. We do not seek, it is not in our interests as the working class in Britain to go and dominate other nations, to rip them off, to deindustrialize them, to asset strip them. That's not in our interests. It's in the interests of the parasites who are robbing us blind to do that. Our interest lies in the freedom of the nations that have been subjected to neo-colonialism. And if Iran can prevail in this war, and we'll get to how they could prevail later on, it will severely damage the ability of the US and the British ruling classes to continue to exploit the nations in that region of the world, such as Syria, the fallen Syria, such as Jordan, such as such as the war that they've tried to wage on the people of Yemen but have failed to win, such as Saudi Arabia, which is a pure creation of Anglo-American imperialism. To this day, that's who the Saudis serve. And so the destruction of the power of the American and British and French ruling classes in West Asia is something that we must support. And now the Trotskyists will scream, oh, well, look what they did to communists in Iran. Look what they did to trade unionists in Iran. How can you support that? We can support the Islamic Republic insofar as the Islamic Republic fights imperialism. Same with the government headed by President Putin in Russia. We can support that insofar as it fights US imperialism. It's also worth mentioning that when it comes to Iran, the Iranian proletariat is far more developed now and far more educated and far more numerous than they were as a class under the time of the Shah. because Iran has industrialized significantly over the past 46 years, you now have a much more developed working class there, a much more educated working class than you ever had under the time of the Shah. And this is something which the Trotskyites never really want to address, of course. They keep screaming about backward system, regime of the mullahs, etc., obscurantist regime. Well, the Islamic Republic isn't an obscurantist regime. It's not the regime sponsored by the US and the British in Syria, in places like Afghanistan back in the day, in the time of the Soviet war, in other places in the world, in West Asia. The movements and regimes backed by the West are obscurantist, backward-looking, and purely reactionary. The government of the Islamic Republic has overseen a vast expansion in the economic, scientific, and technological base of Iran. This is something which is never addressed by the Trotskyites. And of course, we've talked before about the Trotskyites will then say, "Oh, what about the women of Iran?" Well, how were most of the women of Iran doing before the revolution of 1979? I know there's the old joke meme that floats around about, this was Iran before the Islamic takeover in 1979. Women in bikinis surfed in the Red Sea. Bikini-clad female commandos guarded the Shah and stuff like that. And it's the kind of stuff they probably show Trump to convince him to do something. Of course, though, for the great majority of women in Iran who were peasants, that was where the great majority of the population were prior to the Islamic Revolution of 1979. There was like a tiny Iranian petty bourgeoisie, and there was a small, relatively small but quite powerful proletariat related to around the energy industries, and that is the reality of it. And the proletariat has, and including its female half, has advanced enormously over the course of the past 46 years. So the proletariat is much stronger in Iran now than it was in 1979, and much more well developed. Now, I do want to pick up here on a question that's just come in the comments, just to divert for a moment. Should we not draw a distinction between the workers of Iran and their theocratic government? We support the workers. Okay, how? How do you draw a distinction between the government of Iran and the working class of Iran when it's the entirety of Iran that is under attack by US imperialism? US imperialism aims to destroy the government of the Islamic Republic, not for what it is, but for what it is. They aim to destroy the government of the Islamic Republic because it did two things that are crucial. First of all, it removed a huge amount of foreign influence over Iran. It did that. It more firmly established than ever before the sovereignty and independence of Iran. Those are the things that US imperialism wants to remove. Now, when you're in a country like Iran, regardless, and we covered last night that there are contradictions and antagonisms in Iranian society, which the US imperialists are, of course, skilled at exploiting. But when you are under siege from US imperialism, which wants to do to Iran what they did to Syria and what they've done to Ukraine, when US imperialism grabs hold of a nation, it's not the working class that comes to power. The working class is the first on the chopping block of the compradors, who US imperialism plants into power. And then US imperialism is then able to destroy the industrial base built up by the Soviet era in the case of Ukraine, or by the era of the Islamic Republic in the case of Iran. And when you're under attack from US imperialism, what the working class must do is rally behind the government to the extent that the government fights for the sovereignty and independence of the country against US imperialism. And that's what communists must do as well. And you have to put aside the very real barbarity that was imposed upon the communist movement by the Islamic Republic in the 1980s, because we're talking here about, of course, very real acts of murder and that were carried out by the Islamic Republic. That's true, but we cannot let that history get in the way of a correct judgment now. And the correct judgment to make now is that the Islamic Republic has been and is fighting US imperialism. US imperialism is the primary contradiction facing the oppressed nations of the world. US imperialism, if we're talking about our situation, is the most is the anchor of the entire imperialist system. Without US imperialism, the rest of the smaller imperialist powers will go down to defeat along with it. And so it is in our interest that the Islamic Republic prevails. Now, if the Islamic Republic prevails and US imperialism starts to go down the tubes quicker than it is already, will the class struggle and the other contradictions in Iran need to be resolved? Yes. But without US imperialism hanging over Iran and waiting to destroy it and devour it, those class contradictions that exist in Iran can then play out in a more natural and normal way without the imperialists waiting to jump in and destroy it. And this is why it is the first priority must be the defense of the nation against imperialism and against the attempts to return Iran to neo-colonial subjugation. And for us in the West, it is important for us to see the weakening of the British, French, German, and American ruling classes so it can aid our struggle against those ruling classes. And that is why we must back Iran. Now, the other thing to say is, of course, that the imperialists themselves understand that this struggle is an incredibly important one, which is why they're going to throw everything they possibly can to keep Israel fighting the war. Remember what Lindsey Graham said? Pray for Israel. And the Israelis better get praying pretty quickly because they're the ones who are going to be on the chopping block for this. Does this mean that the US imperialists are readying an intervention? There will be many in the US imperialist system. Many fanatics inside Congress and deadheads in the intelligence community and military who think that they can launch some kind of intervention against Iran. And the US could launch bombing raids against Iran. They could try to do a decapitation strategy on the entire government. They've already tried that to a certain extent. But then one must ask the question, what does the US do then? If they're going to try and kill the entire government of Iran, well, first of all, I doubt they would succeed. And secondly, well, where do they go from there? This is the interesting question, because as we have covered, the US cannot invade. So the British certainly fucking can't, nor can the French, nor can the Germans. Even if they pulled all their forces together, they couldn't do it. And they've still got a war in Ukraine they haven't finished off yet, which is only going to end in disaster for them anyway. So the question is, well, is the US going to jump in? And many are saying that it is. Well, other than the attempt to assassinate the Iranian leadership, which they might try, or a more extensive and more barbaric bombing of Iranian civilian areas, which is what imperialism always does, their room for maneuver is very, very limited. And you can see already that what's actually happening in Iran is that the Israeli claims of air supremacy are just simply untrue. The operations you're seeing against Iranian targets, such as police stations, government buildings, and other places, they're being carried out by US and Israeli agents on the ground, who are sending up drones to guide in strikes, airstrikes, and often these airstrikes are carried out by drones launched from inside Iran, not from Israeli fighter jets, which are finding it more and more difficult to stay in the air over Iran. So the claim of air supremacy is already evaporating, that they dominate the Iranian skies. That isn't true. They're having to resort to terrorist tactics, to car bombings, to sabotage operations. So this bombing campaign is already fizzling after a few days. The Iranians, though, have thousands upon thousands of ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles, which they haven't even launched yet. They're claiming that they can bombard Israel for 6 months. Well, we'll see if that's true. But it's certainly the case that their ability to strike Israel has not been compromised by that initial strike. And the more one looks at that initial first day of action from the US and Israel, the more it looks like an assassination campaign, an attempt at regime change brought on by the decapitation strategy of the military, and trying then to run a lot of psychological operations inside Iran to try and convince anybody to stage some sort of coup. So that was the agenda, that they were looking for a rapid collapse. It hasn't worked, which is why now you're getting very contradictory signs coming out of the US. Sometimes they're saying, oh, we will back up Israel. Sometimes they're saying that they won't. They're playing the same game that they do on Ukraine, because they are afraid of what would happen if they committed their own forces. They're afraid of what would happen domestically, in terms of the reaction of the domestic populations to this, and they're afraid of what would happen to any forces they deployed against them. They have real problems, and this leads us to the next part of the discussion, which is the idea that Trump vetoed an assassination attempt against Ayatollah Khamenei that the Israelis wanted to stage. I think that what that means is that the Israelis tried to stage one, it didn't work, and now Trump is distancing himself from it. That's what's going on there, and this is what is the case. That if Trump is saying that, it means that had it gone right, had they managed to kill Khamenei, then Trump would probably have come out and taken credit for it. This is the way it's going. Now, I'm going to address this comment from Shexmas, who's come in and says, communists must get back a country sedated on the opiate of the masses. Great idea, comrade. Okay, I'm going to be absolutely fucking blunt with you, and I'm going to say to you, you have not the faintest idea what that quote even means. Go away and read the whole thing. Go away and read the whole quote about what religion is, and it will make a lot more sense. The sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of the heartless world, etc. Iran's not far gone on the opiate of the masses, you fucking dork. Look at there's all kinds of contradictions in Iran, and there are a lot of class struggles and political struggles inside Iran. The Iranian population is not sedated on the opiate of the masses, you moron. Yeah, the Iranian population have all kinds of political opinions and are engaged in all kinds of there's all kinds of class struggles that go on inside Iran. What they're largely unified around, though, is that they don't want their country returned to Western domination. You utter idiot. Try reading something about the Iranian Revolution and the development of Iran, which hasn't been pulled out of the fetid arsehole of some Trotskyite. Stop making yourself look bloody stupid, because that's what you're doing, parroting this nonsense. When you say, oh, opiate of the masses, I guarantee you, you have not fucking read the actual full document that's from. I think that you've read a line and now you're talking shit, and you're talking more shit here. Iran is like a medieval country run by bishops and archbishops. Well, they don't have bishops and archbishops, do they? They have quite a complicated system. Yes, they have the supreme leader at the top of it, but they have a parliament, they have a president. You didn't have a fucking you don't think you even understand how medieval countries were run either. Again, you're talking like completely ignorant nonsense. Go away and read a damn book. And because you are clearly an ignorant troll and a provocateur, you're now banned. So kindly fuck off, do about 2 years reading, and then come back. Because this idea that Iran is run by like backward-looking obscurantists is just simply untrue. Like, if you look at the scientific and technological base of Iran now compared to what it was under the Shah, it's improved enormously. It's improved exponentially. Look at the literacy rate compared to how it was under the Shah. What medieval country in Europe had a literacy rate of well over 90%? I can tell you now, it was none of them. What medieval country in Europe had like such significant comparative developments in terms of the improvements in the scientific and technological base that Iran has had? What backward country has that? None of them. What country run by priests in the Middle Ages Europe had that? None of them. This doesn't make any sense. I don't think you understand either Iran or the governmental systems in Europe in the Middle Ages. You're relying on memes and cliches. Don't feel bad about it, but do educate yourself. Honestly, like, and my frustration here is partly a reflection of the fact that, like, this is the kind of shit that I used to believe in myself. I too used to be one of those people watching the shadows on the wall in the very lowest level of Plato's cave. But I learned my mistakes and I actually fucking educated myself. And if I can do it, you can fucking do it. First, start off by going and reading the full document where Marx talks about religion. I'm going to just call it up now. And so you can look at it. And so where Marx says that it is the opium of the people, what does that actually mean? Let's dive into this now. So this is actually from a contribution to a critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, and this is, you can find this on the Marxist Internet Archive, and this is a bit of improvisation. So I'm going to pull this up now and to see where the relevant quote is, because it's worth reading in full. And when I first read it in full, it did blow my mind as well. Right, here we go. Okay, so this is the introduction to a contribution of to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, and I'm going to post this in the chat so you can all see it. Just excuse me there for a moment. Right, so this is in the very beginning of the work, and so I'm going to read from this, and I'm going to tell you why I've now departed from this so fucking wrong. So, introduction, and I hope you can all call this up from the link I've just posted. This is Marx. He's only 25 years old when he's writing this in 1843, and the quote reads as follows: "For Germany, the criticism of religion has been essentially completed, and the criticism of religion is the prerequisite of all criticism. The profane existence of error is compromised as soon as its heavenly oratio pro aris e phosis, speech for the altars and hearths, i.e. for God and country, has been refuted. Man, who has found only the reflection of himself in the fantastic reality of heaven, where he sought a superman, hello Nietzsche, will no longer feel disposed to find the mere appearance of himself, the non-man, Unmensch, where he seeks and must seek his true reality. The foundation of religious criticism is man makes religion. Religion does not make man. Religion is indeed the self-conscious and self-esteem of man, who has either not yet won through to himself or has already lost himself again. But man is no abstract being squatting outside the world. Man is the world of man, state, society. The state and this society produce religion, which is an inverted consciousness of the world, because they are an inverted world. Religion is the general theory of the world, its encyclopedic compendium, its logic in popular form, its spiritual point d'honneur, its enthusiasm, its moral sanction, its solemn complement, and its universal basis of consolation and justification. It is the fantastic realization of the human essence, since the human essence has not acquired any true reality. The struggle against religion is therefore indirectly the struggle against the world, whose spiritual aroma is religion." Now, so far, so acceptable to atheists. Now, we'll get to how each country's religious experience is somewhat different later on, but we will, of course, continue. Marx continues: "Religious suffering is at one and the same time the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. The abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is the demand for their real happiness. To call on them to give up their illusions about their condition is to call on them to give up a condition that requires illusions. Criticism of religion is therefore in embryo, the criticism of that veil of tears, which religion is the halo. Now, how does this relate to the Islamic Republic of Iran? Now, is the Islamic Republic of Iran a backward country run by these sort of obscurantist clerics? No, it is not. How does religion, via of course, the Islamic Revolution of 1979, differ in a place like Iran? Now, when Marx is writing down, Marx is talking about the Christianity as practiced in Germany and other Western European nations in the 1840s. Marx, in his early writings, is very much still affected by the Jacobin anti-clerical notions, which are motivated by the experience of the Roman Catholic Church as this dead hand of feudal oppression, which you get in all the Western countries at the time. So that's where a lot of the criticism of religion in Marx's early writings comes from. It's informed by that Jacobin revolutionary sensibility. So when we look at a place like Iran, how do we have to change our calculations? In a place like Iran, you had a very strong, of course, communist tradition, a strong tradition of guerrilla movements as well against the Shah. But you also had a religious opposition to the Shah that was also nationalistic. And this is what emerges in the revolution of 1979, a revolution which is also driven by the mass support of the proletariat and peasantry, and which comes to overthrow the Shah when you get the mass strikes of the oil workers and the rebellion of the army against the Shah, and you have Khomeinism emerge. Now, Khomeinism, informed by the works of left-leaning religious idealists like Ali Shariati, combined an awful lot of different aspects, because Khomeinism isn't simply like a backward-looking religious obscurantism. There's very few of those actual people around, and most of them are in the service of the imperialists. Now, Khomeinism, in its more radical period, talked about workers' control of industry. It talked a lot in its earliest form of socialistic reforms, of a kind of like a religious populism that would have certain things in common with what you would see in these days in countries like Venezuela or Nicaragua. So the religion of Iran, the religion that guided the revolution of 1979, whilst of course I am no Muslim, nor am I a Christian or Jewish or of any religion, but one has to be able to analyze things properly. And the form of Shia Islam, which was represented by Khomeinism, was very, very different to the backward-looking, reactionary, largely Catholic, but also Protestant, but largely Catholic Christianity that was criticized by the Jacobins and Marx later. So whereas Khomeinism has all kinds of contradictions, and it is something which I don't hold with, but the kind of religion that powered the form of Khomeinism, which was a religious form of Iranian nationalism, which powered the 1979 revolution, was wholly different, qualitatively different to the Christianity of the early 19th century German states and France and the Western European nations. And it was qualitatively different because it had been exposed to, amongst other things, communism and anti-colonial nationalism, which didn't really exist, at least not in the same form, in 1843. Khomeinism, whether Khomeini himself wanted to admit it or not, was profoundly affected by the legacy of the Bolshevik Revolution and the legacy of the Chinese Revolution and the legacy of the anti-colonial freedom struggles. Whether the Ayatollah himself wanted to confess to that or not is another matter, but the fact is that it was and remains. And in Iran now, you have people within the Iranian political system, some of whom are revolutionaries, who are closer to like the original vision of the revolution, some of whom are pro-capitalist reactionaries who would sell the country out in a heartbeat if they thought the US would give them a deal. This is why you cannot just simply say, oh, Iran, religion, bad, backward. Just simply isn't true. The kind of religion that animated the 1979 revolution had been profoundly changed by the anti-colonial freedom struggles that were unleashed by the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and the Soviet Union, and by the Chinese Revolution of 1949. It's a different beast. And so you can't just sit there and deadheadedly repeat something that you haven't even read properly and you don't even understand, and apply it in a rigid and dogmatic fashion to other countries. Like Lenin wouldn't have done that. Stalin wouldn't have done that. Mao wouldn't have done that. You have to assess, seek truth from facts, as Mao said. Right. So moving on and going on into the comments here. Right. Let's just pick up on some questions. Right. Caustic Grip says it's funny talking to people who know nothing about Iran. They seriously believe that people still ride donkeys and whip women publicly for showing their faces. Yeah, because they know absolutely fucking nothing about it. Okay, so hello to everybody who's in the chat tonight. And right, just there we go. Okay, so happy Father's Day to Sean, who's celebrating thanks to the actions of Iran. Molotov Cocktail says the bourgeoisie will use religion like they took Protestantism and told the proletariat, if you are meek and mild and obey and work hard for your entire lives, you'll go to heaven. Yeah, true. The Real Truck says, can you touch on why this isn't like supporting the Tsar in World War I in Russia? What, supporting Iran? Because the Tsarist regime in Russia in World War I was owned and controlled by Britain and France. Germany to an extent had an interest in there too. The US had an interest in there too, but the Tsarist Russia was and bourgeois Russia in the brief period between February and October was owned and controlled by the French and the British imperialists. That's why Kerensky stuck with the war, because the Russian bourgeoisie was a pathetic creature that was controlled by outside imperialist powers. Iran is not like that. Iran is not controlled by the imperialist powers. If it was, then there wouldn't be a war. If it was, then Iran wouldn't have made all the progress that it has made over the past 46 years. Tsarist Russia was a deeply backward place that was controlled by its politics were controlled by external actors. Its bourgeoisie was controlled and owned via extensive loans by principally Britain and France. It was Tsarist Russia was used by the British and the French as the Russian peasantry, the Russian army, was used as cannon fodder by the British and the French against the Germans, which is why they were desperate for the Russians to stay in the war, even though the Russians were getting absolutely fucking tanked by Kaiser-era Germany, by the German army, and suffering enormous casualties and couldn't equip or arm their forces properly. The British and the French were desperate for them to stay in the war, and so were making all kinds of promises and threats to Kerensky to make sure that he kept them in the war no matter what. And it's why the Bolsheviks prioritized getting Russia out of the war. And this is different. Iran is not dominated by foreign capital. Iran is not a puppet of Britain, France, Germany, or the United States. If it was, there wouldn't be a war. Right. Right. Okay. So I'm just going to go back up here, check out some more. Dan Lindstrom says lots of Muslims in Iran are actually communist and even Stalinist. That's true. President Jesus says Trump, in a week, Trump will be saying he barely knows Bibi, always thought he was a loser. Yeah. Real Truck, I hope that answered your question. Almir says you need to upload this part about religion as a shorter video like you did for Owen Jones. Yeah. Okay. We'll do so. Right, going down here. Do we have a problem with people who are determined to remain stupid? We have a problem with a system that is determined to keep people stupid. To answer Caustic Grip's question, we're encouraged to be as short-sighted, stupid, and ahistorical as possible. That's just how the system aims to keep us in the dark. So you have to break out of the programming and they're pushing us towards stupidity to be able to learn anything. Abolish NATO said, would Russia and China really engage in an existential conflict for Iran? Well, Russia's engaged in an existential conflict with the US already. Apparently, I think the Chinese have an interest, a very strong interest, as Marius, I believe, in the chat has already pointed out, in making sure that Iran stays afloat. And so you can expect the Chinese to support Iran, to support its ability to continue on in the war, and for the current government and system to remain in place. This is something which the Chinese do have an interest in doing. Bill Beebe says, when you say the British are involved, I think it is MI6 working for the Rothschild family. That's very short-sighted and wrong. I mean the British ruling class, which is a lot more than the Rothschild family. The Rothschilds are, of course, in there and have been in there for a very long time. But the British ruling class stretches way beyond them and into various other families as well. There's not that many of them in reality, but it is far more than just one family. And so when I say British, what I'm referring to is the British ruling class, their state machine, their secret services, their military assets. It's the bourgeois dictatorship in action. And yes, the Chinese, just to go back to that point, do have an interest in backing up Iran, and do have an interest because their interest is based partly on the Belt and Road Initiative and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the other institutions that the Chinese are trying to build. One of the aims of the US in knocking out or trying to knock out Iran is to try and destroy the Belt and Road Initiative. That's why they've been so desperate to knock down Pakistan and to carry out sabotage operations in Pakistan and to sabotage the China-Pakistan economic cooperation. Because if Pakistan is able to more freely develop outside of the domination of the US and the British, then it may break free from US and British strangulation. Now, of course, that Pakistan has many troubles to overcome and many internal contradictions to overcome. But if they were able to be freed from US and British economic domination via their partnership with China, then that would be a significant blow to US and British imperialism. Just the same as if Iran is able to be preserved and integrated into what the Chinese are building up, then that will be a significant blow to US and British imperialism. Hence why they are so desperate to destroy Iran. That's one of the reasons why, anyway. Molotov Cocktail says, we need to save Western civilization, guys, have nothing to say, nothing to saving the world is a seductive story to tell themselves. Yeah, look, the saving Western civilization bullshit artists are just exactly that, the bullshit artists. Guys with like Roman and Greek busts as their profile pictures on Twitter, going on and on and on about Western civilization, whilst not fucking realizing that Western civilization is collapsing around them precisely because we are in the late stage imperial decay. And like, if you actually are serious and you actually want to preserve the genuine achievements of countries like Britain, France, or the United States, then you have to take those out of the hands of the bourgeoisie. you have to remove the US, the British, the French, the German bourgeoisie from power to be able to properly protect and develop those genuine scientific, technological, and cultural achievements that Western civilization has brought into the world. But if you leave those in the hands of the bourgeoisie, they'll all be destroyed. Just the same way that the legacy of Rome was destroyed by the ruling class of the Roman Empire. So the legacy, the real positive legacy of Western civilization, if it is to be preserved, must be preserved by the bringing down of the bourgeoisie, by the proletariat, and by a proletarian dictatorship, taking the achievements of the various Western nations and developing them further in a way that only proletarian rule can. Of course, the grip says Western civilization equals imperialism, and they perfectly know it. That's what it means at the moment. That's why they're obsessed with Roman history, but apparently they've learned nothing from it. Western civilization can mean something else, but it can't mean something else when the bourgeoisie are in charge of it, because with them in charge of it, it will always just mean imperialism. So if you want to actually defend real cultural achievements, real educational achievements, real economic and technological achievements, then you have to get rid of the rule of the bourgeoisie. Because if it remains to be something which is just in their hands, then it's going to remain something which is only about oppression and immiseration. Right. Okay. So is Western civilization something worth preserving? Not in its current form. In its current form, it needs overthrowing. But there is very significant elements and achievements too that the bourgeoisie have made in its progressive period in the Western nations, which can be built upon genuinely and more properly developed by proletarian rule. That's the thing. So moving on and looking at the near future. We will be back tomorrow with another show analyzing the latest in the war, because this is a war which I think is going to run on until, of course, the Americans work out that they're not getting what they want out of it. Then they might quit, because their options for expanding the conflicts are actually quite limited. So I'll be back in tomorrow to check where things are going. I'm not going to make any predictions for now. But what I will promise you is that we will do a textual analysis of some of the Trotskyite work on this in the upcoming weeks. So that's something for you all to look forward to. So we'll be doing some more stuff on this. Thanks to everybody who supports the show on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. I will be back with you again tomorrow. And until then, I will leave you with a musical interlude.
știm noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și scut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce înseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai.